All right, I think we're gonna get started. My name is Alyssa Paparatto. I've been in the production role at fashion companies for I want to say over 12 years now. But I'm just here to kind of guide you through how to choose a correct production partner that fits your needs and just kind of give you a little bit more knowledge to help you on your path in manufacturing. Okay, so let's get started. Um, let me, okay. Introduction. I kind of introduced myself. I've in the past I've worked with Mara Hoffman most recently. I'm also worked with Cease Marjan for the kind of entirety of that brand. Before that, I was with Ralph Rucci, which is a couture house where I learned a tremendous amount. Sadly, that industry is dying, especially in the US. Um, and then before that, I worked as a trim manager at a more corporate company called the Levy Group, which was kind of my first real job out of college. Um, what we're going to go through in this webinar is just different types of manufacturers that are available, how to find them, how to evaluate potential partners and kind of vet them, tips for building, a strong and collaborative relationship. And by the end, we'll hopefully, be equipped with the knowledge and strategies to make informed decisions. And then also, leave time for some questions as well. Why your production partner matters. So your production partner is what I think is kind of, it's more than just a manufacturer that you go to for your goods. It is really a true partnership. It ultimately is the product that you're putting out into the world, which is your brand. You want to achieve the high quality products to get your customers to keep coming back and trust you and build that relationship with your consumer. The expertise ensured design are executed flawlessly is what you're looking for from your manufacturing partner. You also want to control the costs, then you can optimize the production expenses. The deadlines are also extremely important, and you want to make sure that you can be on the same page with your manufacturing partners. And the brand's reputation is also kind of another reason why the quality is so important. Like I mentioned before, if you put something out in the world and the quality doesn't hold up, the likeliness of that consumer coming back to buy from you is slim. And yeah, the right manufacturer kind of depends on what your brand's needs and goals are, depending on what your product is. Any type of like ethics that go along or ethos that is with your company is very important to kind of like where you go looking for a manufacturing partner to make sure you guys align. But yeah, types of manufacturers. So you have your local and your overseas manufacturers. I've worked with both. They both have pros and cons. Local obviously is different depending on where you are in the world. Local for me is the US. So local for us, can be lower shipping costs as far as shipping from whether it be New York City to your warehouse. Although that doesn't include the costs for shipping fabric or trims to get here. Once that's landed, that's a whole nother story. The face-to-face communication is huge. I find it very crucial with our domestic partners. Being that I'm in New York, I'm able to actually go and be in the factories and work on things face to face, which can help. It's also just really nice to build those relationships and have those bonds. A lot of the factories I've worked with in the city, I've kind of built those relationships for so long that it's basically family at this point. And you do have faster turnaround times because you can be in there and you can kind of push a little bit more, and it's not just an email that someone's getting in their inbox that they can put off to the side. The cons are the labor sometimes can be higher. There but at the same time, just when that into consideration with the labor costs locally is just the rules and regulations and all of that stuff. And then they're usually also not vertical. So by that, I mean that I mentioned fabric earlier, you're basically paying for your fabric to be landed. So there are some fabrics that can be like mills in the US, but majority of them are not. But once those goods are landed, you have to kind of facilitate everything it takes to make your product. For overseas, you have the pros are lower labor costs, larger production capacities. So if you're putting out 1,000+ units, your turnaround time is going to be a lot more efficient going overseas than if you were in the garment district in New York. The higher shipping costs. So you have your duty and your freight on your finished goods, which you wouldn't be paying duty if you were producing locally on the finished good, at least. Potential communication barriers. So the potential communication barriers, clearly like language barriers, could be email, obviously is sometimes an issue, and then potential longer lead times. Large scale versus artisan. So your large scale, you have high volume production. They have established processes. They usually are literally operating kind of like a machine, and they have competitive pricing. The cons, so there's less flexibility and limited customization. For artisans, they specialize in specific skills. They have unique craftsmanship where you can have like greater customizations, and lower production capacity and higher costs is one of the cons. And then the specialized versus general. So specialized is expertise in certain techniques, products or materials. And then your cons, less flexibility for diverse product lines. The general would be pros are versatility in various product types. Cons may lack expertise in niche areas. This kind of goes into play with, I would say, usually your cut and sew knit factories versus your ready-to-wear factories, like for wovens and stuff. They're the machinery and stuff that is kind of goes hand in hand with that is very different. There are factories who will say they can claim to do it all, but that a lot of that is just sometimes not true. Finding the potential manufacturing partners. So the ways to do this are attending trade shows and industry events. You can connect with manufacturers in person, see the work firsthand. Tap into your network is huge. I think I reach out to people I've worked with in my past, from my past very frequently, and then use online platforms like Folklore Source. The CFDA website has been a lifesaver for me at times. It's great. You can go on there and like look for cutting, sewing, LA, New York. So that's been great. LinkedIn is a great place to find partners. A lot of manufacturers lately have been like reaching out, trying to find new clients that way. Makers Row is another website, and you can filter by criteria. And then vet potential partners. Just make sure you research their reputation, client reviews, and certifications. It's really hard to find great partners, and there is a lot of information out there already that can help you. Evaluation criteria. So non-negotiables, your quality standards. Does their work meet your expectations? Again, quality standards is going to be something that differs brand to brand. Certifications, do they have relevant certifications, fair trade, organic, blue sign? There's a ton of certifications. You can go on those websites and see kind of like what aligns with the brand. Other factors, your MOQs, so your minimum order quantities, are they reasonable for your production volume? This is a huge question to ask straight off the bat with any manufacturing partner. Their timelines, can they meet your deadlines and handle urgent orders? This is also huge. Communication, are they responsive, clear, and detail-oriented? Pricing, understand the breakdown of cost, development, sampling, production pricing, and any additional fees. Ethics and sustainability, do they practice align with your brand's values? Making first contact. So be prepared with designs, tech packs, any material questions that you might have, your desired your quantities, the timeline that you're looking to kind of work with. A lot of the times when I'm first reaching out to a manufacturer, if it's pre-production where I'm kind of doing counter sourcing or something like that, I'm asking, do they have any mills that they could source these materials from if it's overseas? If it's domestic, I'm bringing the sample there to the factory to kind of run down if it's something that they are able to do, if it fits into their timeline. Your warning signs, once you make those initial contacts, is unclear communication. If they're kind of like beating around the bush with information, and lack of reference samples. If they can't send you pictures of samples, or if you go visit a manufacturer and they kind of seem a little uneasy, I would say that's a little red flag. And again, ask the right questions. What are your minimums? What is the production lead time? What does your production process look like? So it could be from the initial production order, there's a ton of samples, at least for the fashion industry. I know there's some other types of, I think cosmetics was another thing that I was supposed to gear this towards as well, kind of, but at least for garments and whatnot, you have your pre-production sample, and then you have fit samples and TOPs and like all these different things. So it's just kind of like making sure that these, the process aligns with what your needs are. And then payment terms. So it's whether or not, what you can work with cash flow wise, making sure that you're letting the manufacturer know kind of what payment terms you're looking for and negotiate that up front. And building strong partnerships. So contracts are huge, even for small orders. It just protects everyone. Clear communication, regular communication, expectations and any issues. Invest in the relationship, build trust and understanding. Investing in the relationship is huge. Be respectful, I think, is the investing relationship. Be respectful and celebrate success, I think, are it. Again, I've mentioned I am like family with some of the people I've worked with. It really is, a kind of like push and pull relationship with your manufacturing partners. And I think that's a great thing to remember, and just know that, it's not, they don't ultimately, I wouldn't look at it as like them working for you. It's like you're working together. They're part of the team. Key takeaways. Your production partner is your ally. That kind of goes with what I just said. The right manufacturing partner is not just a supplier. They're a strategic partner invested in your brand's success. Their expertise can significantly impact product quality, cost efficiency, and your brand's reputation. Define your needs before your search. So just know what you're looking for. This being said, there are times where I've actually reached out to manufacturing partners or potential manufacturing partners and asked them kind of what their capabilities are. So that way, when I am looking for something eventually, I kind of know who to reach out to cut some sourcing time out in my end. And then do your homework. Don't rush into any relationship with the manufacturer. Definitely ask about any questions you might have. Ask to see samples. Do costing exercises. This is going to be beneficial for both you as a brand and for your manufacturing partner as well. Takeaways. Communication is key. Open, honest, frequent communication is essential for successful partnership. Clearly outline expectations, timelines, any concerns throughout the production process. Invest time in building a strong, trusting relationship with your manufacturer. Protect your brand with contracts. Even the small orders, well-crafted contract is crucial. It outlines responsibilities, timelines, payment terms, and quality standards, protecting both your brand and the manufacturer. And I think that is it. So I'm going to answer some questions that I see in the chat if I can get my computer to. So one of the questions right now are, what are the typical payment terms? Can they be negotiated? So again, it depends. I know locally, if we're speaking about payment terms, a lot of the times it's kind of pay before the goods ship, or pay upon shipment of goods. I know overseas, you can kind of get net terms here and there. Once you build your relationship with your manufacturing partner, you're able to kind of negotiate it further, but starting that relationship the terms can be a little bit harder. Could you share some specific examples of how the wrong production partner can negatively impact a brand's reputation, and conversely, how the right partner can elevate it? Okay. So this goes to quality, I would say. And as far as like fit goes and whatnot, if you put together a tech pack and you spend all this time, fitting, and then your manufacturing partner sends your production, it goes out into the world and the fit is completely off. That can be a terrible thing, and also very upsetting to your customers. So I think that is, definitely that, and any type of quality issues, whether it be like the fabric quality, or just sewing or anything, that is definitely a red flag. And then elevate it. I think, again, quality is huge. I think, getting certain things earlier than you thought is always better too, if it comes to something that you're trying to, market in a certain way. I hope that answers that. Some red flags brands should be aware of when vetting potential manufacturers, especially if the terms of ethics and sustainability. Red flags would probably be certifications or lack thereof. It's a good way to kind of vet them, especially if you can't go visit a lot of manufacturers and be there on the floor. I would say a red flag too is just communication. If they're not giving you complete transparency of the way that they operate, a way that you can also kind of come up with a way to vet them yourself is to come up with it's not necessarily a contract, but kind of like a profile form that they can fill out before going forward into production. For emerging brands with limited budgets, what are some cost-effective strategies for finding and working with manufacturers that don't compromise on quality? This kind of depends on what the product is, but I know, for instance, things like t-shirts and sweatpants and things like that, if you're an emerging brand and you don't have the budget to necessarily like go into huge development, people offer blanks, which I know is kind of helpful, because then you can do the blanks and then you can either get the blank, embroider it yourself, print on it. And then as far as like finding a manufacturer who doesn't compromise on quality, again, it's just kind of going to them, looking at their website, just making sure that you're seeing product before you actually are moving forward with anybody. How can brands effectively communicate their vision and design aesthetic to manufacturers, particularly when working with overseas partners who have different cultural references? Tech packs. Tech packs are huge for working with overseas partners. Any type of, reference samples that you can send them with, your quality standards, I think is huge. Yes, tech packs are the best and most effective way to communicate this. In regard to contract, you would want the law to reside where you live, but how does that work when the factory is overseas? The contract is kind of, as far as like laws go, I wouldn't put that much thought into it, honestly. It's kind of more just a contract of like what you expect from this factory partner. As far as putting in there, like, these are the payment terms we agreed upon. This is our MOQ that we agreed upon for now. There could be things where, if you're dealing with overseas factories, there's a chance that they'll ship maybe 5% or over or under your desired quantity. It's just putting out like what you kind of expect from one another in a contract, just so there's no questions asked. Can you speak more on the terms to include in the contract and then how to follow on the terms once the contract has been breached? So who should draft the contract? Does a lawyer need? I don't think that a lawyer needs to be involved. Again, it's just something, it's not super duper formal. It's just something to kind of put together, align on what you expect from one another. As far as terms go, it's just negotiating it. It could be like, I ideally would like net 30, so 30 days post shipment. And then if they can be pushed back, just kind of trying to get to a place that, you know, is okay with your cash flow and then also respects theirs as well. How important is it for the brands to visit potential manufacturers' facilities in person, especially when considering overseas options? I think there's a lot of things that you can do as far as like, if you can't go visit them, it's, you know, a lot, you can ask for images of the facility. A lot of them have their own factory profile, which has a lot of information in it. So that is what you can ask for. If a brand manufacturer are working virtually, what are some tips you can give for smooth partnership? This, I would just say communication. I use WhatsApp a lot for overseas partnerships. You know, a lot of the times emailing, especially when someone's on the factory floor and they don't have a computer with them all the time, WhatsApp has been great. But yeah, what are the basic certifications all production partners should have? This again kind of depends on who, you know, what your brand wants from their partner. I personally, in my past, have always looked for blue sign. There's also like if they're working with a like if it's got certified. But again, it's all depends on the brand itself. What are some steps I should take when searching for overseas leather bag production? What countries are good for leather bag production? Leather, I've worked with Turkey, Italy, Spain, and Portugal. There also are some places locally in New York City that do leather as well, which is just a little bit more pricey, but but I would say those are probably your best countries to look for. Um, what steps can brands take to protect their intellectual property when working with manufacturers, especially in countries with less stringent copyright? This could be something that you put in your contract. I think that would be the best way to handle that. What are some common mistakes brands make when building relationships with manufacturers, and how can these be avoided? Denim. Oh, sorry. I don't know what like any common mistakes would be. I think just it's being respectful. Ultimately, you know, things are going to happen. Also, just know that things will be late. Um, and there will be things that you on your end miss or they on their end miss, and just know that we're all human at the end of the day. And I think that's kind of the best way to approach that. But as far as common mistakes go, it's just, I think there will be mistakes. Just know that and approach it in that way. And then that way you're not, you know, taking it that seriously when things happen. Um, Sorry, there's lots of questions coming up. Do you have any suggestions for finding new tech pack designers that cater to an area of business you're looking to start designing into? Example, swim, denim, leather. Um, I've actually used my network a lot. If I ever need to find a tech designer, I've also worked with asked factories that I've worked with as well to see if they knew of anyone. But I would definitely reach out to your network first. How do you see the future of fashion manufacture evolving, especially with the rise on demand production and 3D printing technologies? I will not lie, I am completely do not know anything about 3D printing. It blows my mind. I will say that. the on-demand production, I think it's very hard to do that. I personally am learning how the on-demand works, and not working on like a regular fashion calendar, because planning wise, it just takes a lot more planning in a way that like normally I've never done. But I wish I could answer that question. I can't. Can you discuss the pros and cons of utilizing a sourcing agent versus directly contacting and working with manufacturers? What factors should a brand consider when making this? What factors should a brand consider when making this decision? If you use a sourcing agent, you're basically going to be paying an additional fee on top of whatever the cost is. So I would say if you're okay with paying that fee, by all means, there's some agents that are out there that are great, and you know they are your liaison, which is, and usually they're on the ground. So that's something to take into consideration. That also being said, it's a game of telephone sometimes, where if you're working with the factory directly, it's just less kind of, there's like less waiting, I guess. And you also don't have that game of telephone, and you don't have that additional fee. But if you also are a smaller team and you don't have someone you don't have someone production wise on your team, dealing with an agent kind of becomes part of your team. So that's another way to look at it. For brands that are committed to sustainability and ethical production, what specific questions should they ask potential manufacturers to ensure alignment, their values? How can they verify manufacturers' claim and certifications? If they're certified, they should ultimately like have that on their website, and you'll be able to find whether or not it's legit, just by using a search engine. And then as far as questions to ask, I think it's just, I think like wages is something that's huge. Safety. You can just look up tons of different audit information online of like how like safety audits and whatnot for manufacturers, and you can kind of ask questions based on that. But I think that's kind of where I would start. Could you provide a detailed breakdown of typical costs involved in production process, including sampling, materials, labor, shipping, and any potential hidden fees? I think as far as the costs go, so your sampling cost is always going to be, there's different ways of kind of how this works. You can have your development charge, could be if you're dealing with someone overseas, could include a specific number of samples. So it could be like a proto, a first sample, and then your salesman sample. And that could just be one lump sum. And that includes like your pattern development and all of that. If you're working locally, all of those are going to be separate fees. And sometimes your pattern maker isn't working directly at the factory. So kind of, as far as that goes, I don't know how to put this in like a small, like short kind of way. And then, and like sampling and materials and all of that. If you're working overseas, it's a vertical situation. So a lot of the materials and labor, shipping is all included in the price that they give you. Whereas if you're working locally, it's not a full package. So you're supplying the materials, all the trims, and every sample is usually charged. And it's not just one, development fee. Hope that answers that. Could you provide a detailed, got that one? When negotiating contracts with manufacturers, what are the key terms and clauses that brands should prioritize to protect their interests, particularly with regards to intellectual property, quality control, and timely delivery? I think this is just kind of with like contracts and manufacturers. Again, it's just kind of what's important to your brand and how you like key terms and clauses. I honestly don't know. I don't want to tell you that I'm an expert at this, the contracts that I've always put together, again, just align with, you know, just not sharing design information and, you know, patterns being, you know, making sure that they're, you know, it's your own intellectual property and it will not be shared or sold. And then quality control, it's just knowing, again, in those tech packs, like just putting somewhere in the contract that you expect, you know, the quality to be up to what is, you know, described in the tech pack. And another thing is also with quality control, you can also just say that you're going to have a third party come in and inspect, and for them to know that that's going to happen. And as far as delivery goes, you know, it's kind of depending on what they're telling you their lead times are. And I don't know if you can actually put that into a contract necessarily, just because of the way that the world works. And, you know, sometimes lead times are 6 weeks, sometimes they're 12. Post COVID, it was insane. So I think that's kind of its own thing. I wouldn't necessarily put that in a contract. Do you know of any website that can help pinpoint overseas production? I don't really know what you mean by pinpoint overseas production. Um, if you're looking for an overseas like manufacturing partner, I think you can again use a search engine, look at LinkedIn. Some websites even now, as far as like brands themselves, are being very transparent about who they manufacture with. So I think that's also a great way of working, is if there's a brand that you know lists that information, and then you can reach out to that partner. But yeah, I hope I didn't know what you really meant by that. I hope it was a little helpful. Or you can use Folklore. I think we're about wrapping up. I don't see any more questions coming in, but I hope this was a little helpful. Not gonna lie, this is my first little webinar, so sorry for all the ums, but I hope it was helpful. And again, my name's Alyssa Paparatto. Feel free to reach out to me on LinkedIn. I'm more than happy to help. But I hope everyone has a great rest of their week and a lovely weekend.